Okay, I'm gonna record. All right. We've got just a few more people coming in. We're just going to get everybody in. If you don't mind, just introducing yourself in the chat real quick so we can have a record of who all is here. We have a running agenda going on. It's currently in the chat. We'll keep posting the link for that. It's a bit.ly, and it's just RSA, all capital, Agenda 2021, so that you can follow along with what we're doing. And we just have our agenda, all the notes from previous meetings on there as well, just to keep you updated. So one of the nice things, if any links that we're talking about, we also have linked in that agenda just to help you out too. I see some names I don't recognize today. So it looks like we have some new people joining us. So I'm glad that you're here with us. And I see a lot of our friends that we see every week or every month, and I'm glad you're with us as well. So let's see, share my screen. I can get to that, there we go. Okay, so you should be seeing our running agenda right here. And again, the bit.ly for that agenda is up at the top of the screen. So in case you are wanting to get on there to check it, you can see it and come back to it later as well. I have two friends with me today from our Office of Curriculum and Instruction to help out. And Brenda Beaver-Chapman, who has been with us on every call, our Director of Social Studies. Brenda, you want to say hi and introduce yourself real quick?
Hi, everyone. I've probably emailed some of you on RSA plans, so good to see everyone.
And then we also have Lauren Jinks-Jones, who is our Director of Early Childhood, who just recently stepped into that role a couple of months ago and has been learning trial by fire with RSA very quickly. So Lauren, would you like to introduce yourself real quick?
Hey y'all, glad to be here. I'm still gaining context and learning alongside you with all things RSA, but happy to be here and happy to help. Yeah.
All right, thank you. And so these ladies are going to be monitoring the chat box as we go. And if you have any questions, please go ahead and drop those into the chat. Because with this meeting, for those of you that are not familiar with this format, we'll usually go over just a little bit of information, but we reserve the bulk of this time just for answering questions that you might have. And so what Brenda and Lauren are very good about doing is taking those questions and kind of grouping like questions together. So we may not answer your exact question, but we'll look at the groupings there. And if we are not getting to the answer you need, just let us know that, and we will move forward and try to get you the answers that you need. So I wanted to remind you, for those of you that are not familiar, that we have our Return to Learn guidance on the RSA webpage for teachers and coordinators. It is also on the overall Return to Learn guidance page that we have on the OSDE website. You can find a direct link to the PDF for the one for foundational literacy, which does include RSA requirements. It was released in August and can be found on that instructional support page as well as the RSA page. If you're needing to make sure that you're receiving updates, please make sure that you are receiving the RSA newsletter. You can go to this link to sign up for that newsletter and make sure that you're being aware of these types of meetings or any other updates. If we need to send information out very quickly, that's usually the first way we do that, along with the administrator newsletter. But sometimes it might get buried in other announcements for administrators. So the first thing I wanted to make sure that we are all aware of is RSA Reports. It is RSA reporting season. The fall is always fun because we have 3 different reports that are required under the Reading Sufficiency Act that all land here at about the same time. The annual district reading plan, which was due August 30th and was completed, we have about 940 sites across the state that serve kindergarten through 3rd grade that are required to fill those out, and we read every single one of them. So I thought I would give you a quick update that we have approved about 650 of those plans at this point as of this afternoon. We have about 75 sites that are currently working on some corrections so we can get those approved, and we have just a little over 200 that are awaiting review. So we are getting those done very quickly. We anticipate having those done by the end of October, which I know we're very happy about because sometimes it's going into November before we can get them all turned in and approved. So if you are contacted, usually by either me or Brenda, I think we're doing the bulk of those. about a correction that needs to be made, please make those as quickly as possible, because the sooner we get those corrections made, the sooner we can get those RSA funds out to you. We are not able to distribute any RSA funds until the plans are all approved for every site, and the next report, the beginning of year report, has been certified for every site. As of the time that I checked yesterday evening, that report, which was due October 1st, we have about 60 sites that are working on some type of issues or corrections for the beginning of year report, and then those are pretty much done as well. So we are on good track for being able to get those funds allocated to districts very quickly, and so we're very happy about that. The third grade promotion report is still currently open. It is due October 31st. This is the one that is located on the wave. If you'll recall, this shifted over to the wave for the first time last year. There is a video tutorial that we've made to show you how to complete this report. Most of the questions I've been receiving about the report are usually able to be answered on that video tutorial. So if you run into any issues, I promise it's not a long one. It's, I think, about 15, 20 minutes, and you can even kind of skip through some things if you need to. That would really help out with answering some of those questions for completing that report accurately. One of the things that's probably the most important to be aware of with that report is that it will not save information for a partial report. So if you're working on a site and clicking for your students and you have to leave to go look something up for a student and click save, when you come back, your information that you already entered will be gone. So you need to make sure that you have all of your information together before entering that data. One of the things that you might consider is just kind of printing out that screen so that you know, and just clicking it so that when you are checking it off on paper, so that when you're ready to enter it, you can just quickly go through and click. It is just clicking some boxes for students, but if you're having to look up information, sometimes it times out on you, or you're having to come back the next day, and that can be very frustrating, I know. I talked to OMES to see how we can fix that for next year. That is somewhat stressful because it's one of the reason for that is to ensure that we're not skipping information, because we had a lot of information that was not entered last year, but the only way to do that then is to make it this way. So it's limitations of technology sometimes, which can be very frustrating, but we are still working through how can we maybe problem solve that.
Melissa, before you go any further, I've got like 3 questions on where is the wave located, and if I can't access it because I'm new, how do I get access to get on it?
Great question. So the wave is located on single sign-on. It's another application that you will find. And if you do not have access to it, your superintendent will need to assign you that access. It does not come through our office or through OMES. You'll need to talk with your superintendent. That would be the same as for any application on single sign-on. Your superintendent is the one who assigns, or their designee is the one who assigns that. If your superintendent, especially if they are new and are struggling with how to assign that, shoot me an email, let me know. I will help you work through it. I've got a little cheat sheet from OMES, or I will help work with OMES to get that taken care of, and so that they know. So, any other questions about reports before we move on to another section?
There's one report about if they changed curriculum since they filed the plan, do they need to go back in and do that?
At this point, since those plans have been approved, probably not, because I know that districts make changes throughout the year sometimes, and we honestly just can't keep going back and changing our plans where your plan was simply a plan. If it's something that you are concerned about, or that you really do feel that needs to be reflected, shoot me an email and I'll work with you to get that updated so that we're making sure that we have accurate information. We do want that as much as possible, but we also know that sometimes things happen, especially this year, and being in a constant state of flux, changing plans could be more trouble than sometimes what we're really needing.
So there's only one more question since we have your attention so far. If a student enrolled during COVID distance learning but never tested, how do we mark them on the report?
if they
we have students showing on the report that left our district in October through January. Do we mark them? So I guess it's two parts.
Those, and again, that's addressed on the video as well, but it's also to mark those students as not tested due to exit in both situations. Understanding that nobody was tested, that's a column that we had added anyway, and we can only make so many changes to a report from year to year to be accurate. So understanding that the not tested due to exit means that's something that you really were not able to do anything about. They enrolled later after COVID started, which means you have had no way of working with them, or they left your building well before, and we're getting several of those from October. Part of the issue of why we're getting so many of those is normally those students would have only been pre-populated with students who did not meet RSA criteria on the state test. And because of the situation from this spring, we had to pre-populate with all third graders. And when OMES pulled that, I believe it pulled it from the October 1 counts, the official counts. So sometimes we've had some of that. So if you have a student where they're just not there and you're not responsible for that student, mark on that last column, not tested due to exit. And that way you will have, it will not hold you up on anything there. Okay. Were there any other questions regarding reports? No, we're good. Okay, if you have more as we keep going, go ahead and put it in the chat, but we're going to keep moving forward. I wanted to address a couple of questions that have been frequently asked here lately, especially as we're moving into reading plans and interventions. And one of the first questions is, who exactly has to have an individualized program of reading instruction, or an IPRI, which we also sometimes call an academic progress plan, because, you know, we like to have multiple names for one document, of course. It's a government office, of course. So for kindergarten through third grade students, all students who scored below a grade level target on the universal screener must have a reading plan or be receiving intervention. This would include students with an IEP who are being serviced through special education, and it would also include English learners. The IEP students and English learner students often also have some type of individualized plan, and these do need to be aligned. We don't have separate goals. The goals that are in the special education room for students who are struggling with reading should be the same goals that we would have on this individualized program of reading instruction. The reason why the IEP cannot take the place is that there are some state mandates that are required through RSA that are not on a federal IEP form. So we do have to have both forms completed, but there's no reason why the goals for those forms should be separate or different. They should align. After third grade, for fourth and fifth graders, students who are promoted with good cause exemptions or through the student reading proficiency team for probationary promotion, they must receive intervention. That's what's stated in legislation, is that those students must receive intervention until they are reading on grade level according to a screening assessment, or when they transition to a locally developed plan after fifth grade. Okay. The individualized program of reading instruction, that IPRI form, or an IEP, either one can document that intervention. So if you have students that have an IEP after third grade, they don't necessarily need a separate form. The IEP will fulfill that requirement in legislation of making sure they have intervention and documenting it. But if they don't have some type of form like that, then that IPRI can fulfill that. That is up to you as a district. If you feel that that gets too confusing for teachers as to who needs who and what, if you feel that it's best to go ahead and fill out that IPRI form, that's perfectly fine. But really what you need is documentation that that required intervention is taking place for students promoted with good cause or promoted through that student reading proficiency team. And again, that lasts until they're reading on grade level according to a screening assessment, not according to the OSTP, but according to a screening assessment, such as STAR, MAC Growth, Ames Web, Acadience, all of those 7 approved assessments, or until they transition to a locally developed plan after 5th grade. So did we have any questions about IPRIs and who needs those before I move on to the next question? Good so far? We can't use OSTP for 4 through 6. No, it specifically, Sherry says in legislation until they are, it specifically refers to that screening assessment. That's not anything that we've come up with. That's what our legislators defined as the requirement. So the score that's needed to exit is meeting that 40th percentile at whatever stage they're in. So if it's a 4th grader and it's January, then I would look at that 4th grade 40th percentile or grade level target. And if they have met that or above, then they are off probation, or they are not meeting that state requirement any longer. All of our technical guidance for all 7 of our screeners on the last page of that technical guidance lists the grade level targets for kindergarten through 5th grade at all the beginning, middle, and end of year sections, so that you can use that number to help determine when they need to come off of probation or no longer required to have intervention. Okay, and then a related question that we are frequently getting asked about now are interventions, particularly with the unique situation that we have going on right now with all of our different learning styles and situations. So a couple of overall comments is that interventions are always in addition to core instruction. They are never a replacement of core instruction. Students need to have that time for core instruction to address on grade level instruction. If it's a 3rd grader, they need to have access to 3rd grade objectives and materials so that they're continuing to progress. They may need modifications and accommodations to make that material accessible to them, but they still need to have that ability to have access to it. As far as who can provide intervention, that's a local decision. It's based on the needs of the student, the qualifications of the staff, and the resources available. So if it's been determined that a student needs a specialized program, then it's whatever staff member has been trained to be able to use that specialized program. There is not anything that says it has to be a classroom teacher or a reading specialist or a special ed teacher. It could be, it's just dependent on who at your building is able to work with that. Now, should not be a volunteer. It needs to be somebody who is working there with the student and able to be there regularly. But I have had questions of saying we've had a para that has gone through very specialized training on a very specific intervention. That makes more sense that the person who's received that specialized training for that intervention may be more qualified in that instance than a certified teacher. So again, it becomes very dependent on the intervention being used, the needs of the student, and the resources that the school has. As a rule of thumb, for your interventions, you would like to have your more qualified teachers working with your neediest students so that they can really see what's going on. So keeping that rule of thumb in mind. As far as kindergartners when do they need that IPRI? Yes, it is after their mid-year benchmark. And so I know we always have a little bit of confusion with our kindergarten friends. Remember that with kindergarten, we still assess at the beginning, middle, and end of year, and we include those kindergarten students on our beginning of year report. That's one of the things I'm currently reviewing, our beginning of year reports, to see if anybody's accidentally misunderstood that and have left off their kindergarten students, so we can make sure that we include those counts. But for kindergarten in the first semester, we very intentionally wanted to make sure that those students would have access in a traditional year to some good formal instruction before we identified them as needing additional support. But we also did not want to let them flounder for an entire year by waiting until 1st grade. So with our kindergarten friends, we assess them at the beginning of the year to get a baseline and see what's going on. We may have some of those friends, we likely do, that are below some of those benchmarks. Even though those benchmarks are very low, even they may still come in below that. And so we want to make sure that we're targeting instruction for those friends, getting them the best opportunity they can. And a lot of times what we have found is that several of those kindergarten friends have blossomed very quickly within a couple of months of instruction, so that they are no longer needing more specialized intervention. And so that by the time we get to a mid-year, many of those are no longer needing any kind of plan. So In an attempt to reduce some of that paperwork that may not be necessary, we wait until that mid-year to give that individualized program of reading instruction for kindergarten. If you were to have a kindergarten student, though, walk in and say they already have high needs, you've already been working with this family in pre-K, you already know that you want to intervene on them immediately, there's nothing stopping you from starting it early. It's just that that's the latest you would want to start that, is at that mid-year point, okay? All right, so coming back to our interventions for just a moment. When we talk about traditional school, when we're going to brick and mortar 5 days a week, 4 days a week, what we've been used to doing prior to COVID, students who are receiving intervention, the time that they receive that intervention should be as fits their needs. That rule was changed this last June to remove the time requirements off of both Tier 2 and Tier 3. Now, there is still a strong research base and recommendation for ensuring that students with Tier 3 need a very intensive intervention. That 45 to 60 minutes that we've had previously is still well grounded, but we also know that sometimes there's some issues with that time requirement. So we've put in there as fits the needs of those students. But it's also important to remember that Tier 2 differs from Tier 3 based on intensity. It doesn't necessarily mean that they have to do a different intervention program. It means that they are receiving a more intensive intervention. So we might intensify an intervention by increasing the duration, like they might go from 15 minutes a day to 30 minutes a day. We might increase the frequency. Instead of meeting 3 times a week, we might meet daily. And we also could increase or decrease the group size. So instead of a group of 6, I might meet in a group of 1 or 2. If they are on a computer-based intervention, sometimes I might shift to where I am spending more time face-to-face with them. It, again, depends on the needs of the student and if we see them thriving or not. That's why that progress monitoring is so important, because we want to make sure that trend line is moving forward. If they're still staying stagnant and their gap with their peers is staying pretty steady, that's not an effective intervention for them. Even if they're making growth, if they're not closing the gap with their peers, then we need to look at that intervention to see, one is that, are we meeting their needs? Are we addressing their deficit areas? And then do we have the proper intensity on that intervention? Now, that's dealing with traditional, what we've been used to, but this year is anything but traditional. So when we talk about hybrid or virtual situations, consider online programs or instruction through online platforms when possible. I might have a Tier 3 student who it is just not feasible that I meet with them every day, even though that might be preferable. It might be that I can meet with them once a week, and that would be better than nothing. And that's really kind of the mentality that we're addressing this right now. What can we do to meet that student that will address what resources we have available? We know it might not be ideal, but it's certainly better than just throwing our hands up in the air and saying we can't do anything about it, okay? So keeping in mind, what are we able to do? Are we able to meet with that student a couple of times a week, maybe rather than daily? Can we at least get on a call with them maybe for 10 minutes? Offline practice of skills, if we can't do any of that, is going to still be better than not addressing a student's needs at all. So if we have a student that's working on phonics skills and maybe they are not able to access an online program, or you're not able to meet with them online for various reasons, giving them opportunities to practice the skills that they know and keep those fresh, even though that might not necessarily fit under the clinical term intervention, is still addressing the needs that are still off a grade level and still giving them some practice. And we want them to be able to continue to work in that way until we can get back to maybe a more traditional situation, or be able to get to them a little bit better, okay? So do we have any other questions about interventions or IPRIs? We have a very quiet group today. Okay, must mean that we're doing our job. We've discussed this before, but I am going to put it on this agenda again, just to make sure that you are aware, since we are talking about interventions today, that there are some online virtual tools for addressing foundational literacy, which is usually where our interventions lie. So the University of Florida for Literacy Instruction, UFLI, has a virtual teaching hub, and I've talked about it many times. So those of you that have been on calls with me before are probably tired of hearing about it, but you know, when you've got something that's really good and they keep improving on it, then you just want to make sure that people are aware. They are adding new videos daily right now about how to help students with teaching reading online, because this is probably one of the most difficult things, is to teach our little people how to read in an online situation. So they have many tools that can be used, especially if you're using Google Classroom. They have many PowerPoint templates set up, as well as Jamboard that you can use to help manipulate letters so that they can do some building of words, as well as some videos about how to use those tools. There's also some free online resources from Really Great Reading that they have made available for as far as I can tell, the foreseeable future, that are free access. Of course, they have other things that they do have for purchase, but these could be standalone things that can be available to help connect with kids who are needing any help. And then again, free print resources. Many of us are familiar with the Florida Center for Reading Research and those student activities that we can print off, again, that can provide that distributed practice if there is no other way to reach those students. And then it's always helpful for webinars when we're talking about engaging our families virtually. And I think if I have to hear the one biggest heartache that we as teachers have is for our students who are attending virtually, who are just not engaging. And so they had some really good ideas about how we can reach out to engage families virtually as well. So, okay, have we had any other questions? Virtual.
So Beth has a question about updates on virtual testing validity.
Yeah, the auto promote scores. I still have that question down with legal because that's one that we still are really wrestling with. Hold on to it. We're not there yet. I just wouldn't send any notification letters to parents just yet that they've reached that score, especially if it's one that's a little bit suspect. If you're not quite sure what we're talking about, remember that students who meet the end of year third grade level target, we talk about that magic number sometimes, that are eligible for promotion to fourth grade, regardless of their OSTP score. That's one of their pathways for promotion to fourth grade. We have had some concerns for students who are assessing virtually that they have miraculously jumped about 80 percentile points over the 4 or 5 months that we did not have any school. And we know that that's not necessarily a valid score. So we are trying to see what do we need to do, because again, our legislation does not necessarily address that. So I know we've had a lot of schools that, you're right, have had trying to schedule students to come in individually to take that. I would say if you have your students come into school or whether they assess virtually, that is a local decision. And as far as how often they come in to assess, again, is a local decision. Outside of the fact that they do need to assess at the beginning, middle, and end of year, that's a non-negotiable. They do need to have those assessments. Students do need to be progress monitored, but how that can look can be a little bit different as well if you need it to be. Again, the rules and the legislation are written for normal times. This is how we would function normally. With this type of situation where everything is constantly in flux, we are trying to keep the intent of that law as much as possible. And remember that the intent of this statute is to ensure that our students know how to read and that we are addressing their needs. And so when we're addressing their needs, if we're following that intent as much as possible, no one's going to yell at you, okay? I will not show up at your doorstep. I don't have a badge. No one's going to haul you off. RSA police don't exist. So it will be okay. But if there's any questions on how that would be, go ahead and let us know. Renaissance, there is a place to take out the admin password. So Beth, are you able to unmute and talk to me a little bit about that? I'm not quite sure what you mean.
I was just referring to, Jamie had asked a question about the Renaissance doesn't allow testing without an admin password.
Ah.
So there is a place that that can be taken off.
Thank you, Beth. I appreciate clarifying that. There's remote administration guidance also on the RSA coordinator webpage for that Renaissance has provided, or each of the vendors has provided. But if you're having a hard time or something's there, shoot me an email, because I might not know the answer, but I can at least get to our contact for that and just say, hey, we've got a district struggling with this, help us out. And our vendors have been very good about responding to that whenever possible. And Beth, do you happen to know if you can remove that admin password requirement only for virtual students? Kelly says yes, you can choose classes. Okay, perfect.
Yeah, you can choose classes, or you I don't think it can be individually, like per student, but you can change it on class level.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, did we have any other questions? This might be a short meeting today, and I'm sure no one would be upset with that. All right, well, we'll stick around for a little bit if somebody still has something that they want to ask. Otherwise, thank you so very much. Enjoy your fall break. We do have our next meeting in November, on November 10th, and I know that things have been calming down, so we will probably continue working on questions that people have. If we have new information, we'll certainly share that, but right now, we're just trying to keep our noses above water just like you are. So please take care of yourselves more than anything, and remember that we're working on just trying to help our kids as much as we possibly can. Okay, Katie, do you have any suggestions for creating portfolios for our virtual students? Gosh, I know I've been asked this question and I've kind of held off answering it because I'm really struggling with it myself, to be really honest with you. I would say, first of all, if they are taking any assignments virtually, if there's a way to hold on to some of those to see how we can group those into our portfolios, that would be wonderful. It kind of depends on it too. We're going to have to look at that with an eye of, does this match what we saw them doing when they were with us? It's not feasible to have those students come into the building and complete those types of assignments every time. But I also know the concern that we're running the same risk that we run with our screening assessments, is that we might have a little bit more parental assistance with that than we would care for. So I am still struggling with this one, to be really honest with you, and I apologize. I feel like I should know this answer by now, but we'll continue to work on that. Maybe that will be our focus for our November meeting, is maybe portfolios. I think that sounds like a good time to do that. Just to clarify, Jamie, yes, the time limits for Tier 2 and Tier 3 have been removed as of the rules that were approved by the governor in June. And you can find those rules on the RSA legislation page on the OSDE website. It'll say updated rules. And Amber, as far as the Lexile webinar, I am sure it was recorded. I am not positive. Christina McCreary or Sarah Dunn in the assessment office would be probably the ones that would be able to guide you to that link if you're looking for that. So if you need help reaching out to them, just let me know and I'll get to them for you.
So Catherine put in a suggestion that maybe you could screenshot some of the work.
Oh, that's a great idea, Catherine. I like that. Hey, if anybody else has any great suggestions for dealing with portfolios, I am wide open. I would really love to hear some ideas, because I truly am struggling with this one as much as you all are. So that would be a great help. So screenshots of work in the Google Drive folders for portfolios. Yeah, I think that would be really helpful. The assessment office was not recording their meetings. So that would also be, Kelly, thank you for letting us know that. Might be, so I do know they have one other webinar on Lexile, I think, coming up. So it might be a good idea to see if they would be willing to record that for you. So, all right. Well, thank you all. And I think I will. Anything else that's coming up? Seesaw has an option for digital portfolios if districts are using that. Oh, that's great to know. So if you have availability to Seesaw, and remember that you do not have to turn portfolios in to anyone at the state. That is kept at the district level. All you have to do is record that the requirements of the portfolio have been met. If that's something that your district is using and your district administration is good with that, that is perfectly fine. There is nothing that says you have to be on a particular platform, whether it's Google Classroom, Seesaw, or other things. So, all right. Well, Brenda and I will be continuing to review reading plans. So if you are in charge of those wonderful reports and you hear from us, no one's in trouble. We're not yelling at anybody. We're just trying to make sure that no one's getting in trouble later on. None of us look good in Prison Orange. So let's make sure we all have those boxes checked so we can take care of that. When will we know if our plan was approved? You can hop on to single sign-on and check on your plan. Unfortunately, we just plain have not emailed each person or each district individually to let them know, just because of time factor. I will put out an update in the administration newsletter as soon as all of the plans have been approved so that you'll know. So, but if you're concerned about yours in particular, you can just hop on to single sign-on and it'll say it's been approved by the OSDE or not. So
just for me, if I'm looking at your plan and I email you and ask you for a correction and you email me back and say, hey, I made the correction, I will email you and tell you it's approved so that you know it's all good. If you don't email me back, I probably won't because I won't remember to. But if you email me back and say, hey, I made the correction, thanks. And I always send it back and say it's approved.
All right. Anything else? We always get just a few last minute questions.
There was just a suggestion that our IT guys created a portfolio on their Google Drive where teachers could scan and take pics and upload things in it.
I love that. And then follow them year by year. Very nice. Great ideas. Let's see.
It should say over to the side where it should say OSDE approved, right? When you look at it.
It should. All right. Well, friends, go out and enjoy this beautiful day. Go take a walk. Enjoy it. Thank you. Thank you, Linda, Lauren and Brenda or Lauren, Brenda. I guess that becomes a Linda, doesn't it?
My aunt is Linda, so yeah.
Thank you.
My mom is Barbara and my aunt is Linda, so I've been called both of those most of my life, so it's okay.
All right. Well, thank you all. Brenda, I'm going to save the chat.
Okay, I'll save it too, just in case.
All right. Have a great afternoon all. Bye.